So how can we go back from, let's say, our place detail page? Now, one easy way, of course, is to add a ion back button. Do you remember how that worked? You don't just add it like this, you instead wrap it into ion buttons, where you should set the slot to start, which positions it most of the time on the left, but start really depends on the device you're running on and also on the region settings. But wrapped in there, you now add your ion back button, and that ion back button now by default, well, takes you back. Now let me also adjust the title here a little bit. We can later display the actual title of the place we loaded. For now, I'll just at least set it to this, a little bit nicer looking title. And now when we go to a page, we do have that back button and it does take us back. Now one problem we have is when we reload this page, we don't have the back button because Ionic detects that it doesn't know where to take us. As this page reloaded, the app restarted, and therefore this stack of pages is removed. It's cleared. That's just how JavaScript works. If you reload, the app restarts, and all the other memory or what you had in memory is lost. And therefore, Ionic can't really go back because it doesn't know which page came before this page. And that is why on the ion back button, you can add that default ref attribute. By the way, you could also add default ref like this, and set this to the path you want to go to in case Ionic doesn't know where to go to. And then that would be, in our case, places, tabs, discover. And if you add this now, when this place detail page reloads, which is of course a reasonable scenario in a web app where you can load any page by entering the right URL, now we have the back button here too. However, doesn't work, right? Well, that's just the thing here in Angular. There, you indeed have to use default ref like this. Default ref with a slash in between works if you're using Ionic components in a vanilla JavaScript application. When using the Angular one, it should be default ref like this in camel case notation. And now with that, that will reload, and then this button will take us back. Here we go. How else could we go back when we're on this page? Let's say on place detail, we do have our bookings button to book this place. So in there, I'll add an ion button and put just a book onto it as a label and give it a color of primary, something like that. And maybe add a little margin around this button with the margin CSS utility attribute. Now we should see a nice button on the page as it reloads. Here it is. And this button, when we tap it, of course, does nothing at the moment. It can't because we haven't added any logic. So let's add a click listener, and there I'll execute on book place. Now later we'll open a modal there, which will later then allow us to add our user details for booking that place. For the moment, I just want to execute this method, so let's add on book place here to the TypeScript file. And in on book place, at the moment I just want to go back. Now we have a couple of different options for going back. One of them is that we inject the Angular router. We do it like this, import router from an Angular router, and with that injected here, we can call this router navigate, and then enter the URL to which we want to navigate, like places, tabs, discover, like that. Whoops, should be navigate by URL if you're using a full URL. Otherwise, you have to pass in an array with all the segments. With that, if this app reloads, and I click book, we go there. Now, what you noticed, and that, by the way, is also still the case on the back button if we reload, it's playing the wrong animation. It plays the animation it normally plays when adding a page, where the page slides up from the bottom. It should play this down sliding animation, but when this page is reloaded, even for the back button, it plays the wrong one. Now that should just be a bug with the back button, but for our own navigation, it's not a bug. Instead, Ionic by default plays the forward animation if it doesn't know what the previous page was, if there is no previous page on the stack, because it correctly assumes that any navigation you're doing with an empty stack of pages is a forward navigation, and hence it doesn't know it should actually play the backward animation for this navigation. For the book button, when we do go back, it should though. And here, the nav controller can help us. You inject it like this, simply by referencing nav controller as a type, And that is imported from @ionic angular, so it's important to add this import. And now the nav controller can be used for navigating around. You can use this nav controller, and then here you have navigate back and navigate forward methods. And navigate back then takes either an array with these different segments or just a URL to recipes, not recipes, to places, tabs, discover. And now the difference is, under the hood, this will use the Angular router. So this doesn't use any fancy new Ionic router, it uses the Angular router. But it sets some internal metadata or configuration so that the right animation is played. And so now if I click book, this plays the back animation here instead of the forward navigation. Another way of navigating back is to use the nav controller and call the pop method there. This will pop the last page off the stack. Now this has one problem though. Let me show you what the problem is. Let's wait for this app to reload, and if I go forward and I click book, I go backward. Perfect. Now let's say we loaded this detail page as our first page. So I reload the page whilst I'm on that. If I now click book, this does not work because popping doesn't work if the stack of pages is empty. So this is unreliable if you can't guarantee that there is something on the stack of pages. If you can guarantee that though, because it is a page which doesn't really have a route people will use to start into your app or something like that, then you can use that as well. Otherwise, simply use this mechanism. The advantage of pop, of course, would have been that we don't need to specify the path we want to go to, but the disadvantage, of course, is that we have to guarantee that there is a previous page.